Spooling a spinning reel is very easy, just a very simple task with a few steps, but kind of like flossing, we probably don't do it enough. Changing a line is really important. So we're going to show you a couple simple steps to spooling a spinning reel. So one of the first steps is just attaching the line. So what I'd like to do is I like to open the bail, and then I tie my knot ahead of time. So I use a uni knot in most cases, and we're just going to slide that right over and cinch it down, and then just trim the little tag end piece nice and tight there. And the thing is, when you're using lines like monofilament or fluorocarbon, you can spool those right on. When we use braid, we're actually going to have to put a backing on because we don't want it slipping on the spool. Believe it or not, the whole thing will turn within itself. And plus, that line's generally more expensive, and so we don't need, in most cases, to fill that line all the way up with the expensive line. We can use the inexpensive monofilament as I'm using in this case. So if you're fishing species like stripers, saltwater stuff, you may want to put more of the braid on there, a higher pound test, and you just have enough to cover the spool. But regardless, we're going to start with monofilament. So once we start spooling, I don't like to use machines because, the revolutions on there, you tend to damage the line run over, you see the residue on your hands of people that do it. So I like to just gently hold that line right in front of me and just put just enough tension on that I can turn that and just put it on. Let the reel do the work. Now the one little tip I'm going to give you is once you reel it on a handful of times, put some slack in there and make sure that it's natural with the curve. If you've got some line twisting out, you just want to flip the spool. I like to just put it down right in front of me. So just flip the spool over because there is a wrong way to put it on. So you want that to naturally come off. And if you see that twisting out, you've done it the wrong way, just simply flip that spool over. So you can see right there, when I flipped it over, we've got twist in there. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to flip that spool right upside down. We're going to reel a handful of times here, and then you see that how it's just perfectly straight. There's no loops. We have the natural side, so it's kind of like winding a hose. You don't want to do backwards or the wrong way. So now that I have the backing on, because I'm going to put some braided line on this particular reel, again, I put a little bit more backing because I want the cheap stuff I'm not going to ever see. I want to use that with the monofilament. The expensive stuff, I want to use less of that, the things that are not ever going to be seen basically on there. So I'm going to cut this short here, and I'm going to splice it with a back-to-back uni knot. There's a lot of different ways to do it, and then we're going to attach our braid with that back-to-back uni. So basically, we're just going to tie a uni knot on each end, and we're going to draw them together, and that's going to make a really small connection so that we can put the rest of our line on with this braid. Just like anything, just wet it down a little bit, pull them together. So now we've got that nice joint right there. We're going to trim that tight and spool on the braid. And while fluorocarbon or monofilament have a natural kind of one-way flow to it like a garden hose or something like that, the braid does not. There's very little memory. So you can set that down, have a buddy hold it, but it doesn't really matter which way that it comes off the reel. So I just like to set that down in front of you. And kind of like we did before, I just use slight tension with my hand, and I turn that right on until we get just enough line. One thing to avoid is filling the spool too full. So I like to go, I say, between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch off of the lip. If you fill it too full, you're going to have a lot of issues as you're casting and you get the line not perfectly tight on there. It can actually run over the spool and up into the rotor, and that's going to be a bad situation. So make sure you don't put too much on.